Trust. Like I said, I am recording this meeting. I know some folks have to jump off to other places before noon today, so thank you for your time. This group hasn't met as a team since June, and lots has been going on, and I just wanted to take the time before 2021 closed off to try to gather as many of us together to kind of celebrate the accomplishments of last year and take a few minutes to kind of look forward into 2022. We know this recovery effort's a long-term process, and but we've gotten so much great work done on the ground, and I wanted to take the time to celebrate that with you all and share some of the good news. I believe so. Just quick meeting objective. It's a year-end review to highlight some of our accomplishments. We hope to get some share some information on some funding opportunities that we're looking towards, and if there's time, for a little bit on lessons learned as we are working on all of this stuff together and learning as we go. We've been building the plane and flying it at the same time, as the saying typically goes. I believe our first agenda item this morning is going to be to talk a little bit about some of the floodplain restoration work. And Johan, you told me that Robin was going to go first, but I don't see her on the call yet. Robin, are you here with us?
I'm here. I'm just lost the many different initials down at the bottom, I think.
Thank you. I'm so glad. I didn't see your initials. So I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started with McKenzie River Trust.
Sure. Thank you. So I do have some slides to share. So let me try and pull these up. PowerPoint wasn't working great for me earlier, so I just have them in a PDF. Does that work? Can you guys see my screen?
We can,
yes.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to share a little bit about kind of the acquisition work that MRT's been doing in the Holiday Farm Fire perimeter, and this kind of I'm putting it in the box of the agreement that we had or have with EWEB for the acquisition and management of wildfire impacted properties. So just as kind of a reminder for those who weren't aware, MRT has been working with landowners mainly in the floodplain area and then on riparian areas in the fire perimeter, who have decided that they are not going to rebuild and we're looking for other options for their property. So we've worked with them on acquisition for those, primarily for the purpose of helping to reduce vulnerable infrastructure within the floodplain and other areas through the perimeter. So we focused through that agreement on these kind of small residential properties that had a home site within the floodplain that could be rebuilt in the same site. And so that was really the focus for the main part of this. And we've had some pretty good success with that, but we've also definitely learned a lot in the time since the fire came through on that. And then our regular acquisition work has continued in the McKenzie as well, looking at some of the larger floodplain work, and then and riparian land. I say resource land, mainly forest land in the McKenzie fire area. And then also have had some conversations about conservation easements with landowners who are going to stay and have larger properties that they still and we see the value of long-term protection of those properties. So our regular acquisition work has continued. We just have also expanded into doing this holiday farm fire, kind of the smaller residential impacted property ones. So to date, we have acquired 6 buildable parcels, which came with 6 home sites and a total of 25 acres, though I think I needed to update by acres, so don't hold me to that one. And then we are continuing to develop projects. Currently 2 conservation easements are in conversation, and then 2 additional residential floodplain properties, one which will close by the end of the year, and then another that we're looking into very early of next year for a closing on that. So the photos in the background just kind of highlight, I think, in a lot of people's opinions, one of the major reasons why we embarked on this program in general was for properties. This one you can't quite see it because they were moved, but there were concrete pylons that were pretty much in the river supporting the deck of this house. And this landowner came to us for a variety of reasons and was one of the ones where we actually didn't work directly with the landowner. He was represented by a realtor. And so that's one of the things that we're also learning as we've gone through this throughout the year, just the various ways in which working with landowners up the McKenzie corridor. And so beyond the acquisition, part of the work that we're working on is the residential sites. They have a home site, and a lot of that was cleaned up by most landowners, though not all landowners that we are working with have taken advantage of the ODOT cleaning. So there's also some that we're working on where we will embark on doing the cleanup that just didn't happen. But even when ODOT did do the cleanup, there was still quite a bit of material left on site that we have worked on removing and then doing restoration around. And so to date, though we're still working on others, we've decommissioned 3 septic systems that were in the floodplain, and then also removed 3 foundations off of those within those 6 properties that we've acquired. Some of them, the foundations were moved and completely cleaned by ODOT, but like I said, there's others where we've had to kind of step in. And then the work with the septic is really interesting. Just learning what it takes. Is removal most appropriate? Is just filling with sand and fully decommissioning? So we're learning a lot as we go through this and what it takes to do stabilization in some of these areas. And then the restoration work that we've done, I hope you guys can see it. I know you might have to search with your eyes, but we put a lot of willows in the ground. So getting into these sites, and they're small acreages, so the numbers are smaller than you're used to seeing, but it's a large impact for the spots where we are. The pictures in the background here are actually that is the McKenzie floodplain right above Finn Rock. So this property actually was just on the other side of one of the historic McKenzie channel at the upriver bend of Finn Rock. So 200 willow stakes already put in the ground. For the properties that we currently have, we're looking at 3,000 trees and shrubs for next year, and then we're continuing on doing woody debris cleanup on site. Some of the properties that we acquired, they had hazard tree removal, and utilities have come in and done some work, and then most of them just leave the material on site. If they can, they take care of what they absolutely have to. But so there's been quite a bit of material that's still been on site that we are working to clean up. And then looking ahead, as I mentioned, we worked with a realtor on one sale, and that was a learning process for us. But when we started this whole project, we were anticipating, and our first property acquisition was a home site for $120,000. They're going for double that now. So it's really caused an adjustment in prioritization, and then also just having to be really responsive to properties on the market. We do our best to target areas, and we have folks up the river. Brandy, who you probably all know, is upriver, and people know us, they know her, and so the word is there, but it's something that we're constantly adjusting to make sure that people know us as an option for that. And then on top of that, it's just the land values have just grown astronomically from what we expected. So learning on that. And it's not just local folks that are showing interest in rebuilding in the valley. There's a lot of out of area interest in this. That's kind of what I had. I tried to condense it as much as I can. Like I mentioned earlier, there's still the regular kind of MRT work that's happening upriver, but wanted to focus a little bit on that newer piece that we've worked pretty hard on over the last year.
Thank you for that highlight and overview. It's hard to imagine, when we started this, that we thought we could, scoop up some properties at a pretty good price. And, there's just so many challenges. People love our river, and that's a good thing. So yeah, it's bittersweet. kind of situation that we're in today. So I'm going to shift over to Johan, and then maybe I'll break and see if there's a couple questions on the floodplain restoration piece just to keep us moving along. Johan, are you ready to jump in?
I am. Let me bring up my presentation here. Okay.
I think Jen might be helping you out as well, Jen Weber. So jump in, Jen, whenever you're ready as well.
Not that I know of, but she can certainly chime in if she wants to.
Well, I was told to have some notes for Deer Creek, but if you're going to talk about that and you have slides, then you should go for it because I just have notes.
Great. Well, I'll try to be brief on mine so that you can share yours.
I will be brief. Don't worry.
Okay, so this is Johan Hogervorst. I'm the forest hydrologist on the Willamette with the Forest Service. Just wanted to share a little bit about Finrock Reach and then kind of the larger picture in what we call the middle McKenzie, where several of the partners in the McKenzie are working, including Jen and others. So this first shot is a map of the Finrock Reach property, and that was purchased before the Holiday Farm fire, as most people know, 15-16 timeframe. And we had been working in this green polygon that you see at the top here on a design to reconnect the floodplain. So both before and after the fire, we're really kind of looking to floodplain restoration as a fire resiliency technique for before fires and also a recovery strategy for post-fire restoration. And so we have lots of great opportunities on the McKenzie. The McKenzie River Ranger District, the Forest Service, has been working on the South Fork project, which has provided a lot of learning, and we're starting to expand our efforts in different places. And Finrock was one of those that we did the first phase of this past year and want to share some of those successes. So this is a beautiful orthomosaic of the portion of the property that we're talking about here pre-Holiday Farm fire. Flow in the main stem here on the right is going from top to bottom. And the second white arrow here you see is an opening to a side channel. There's kind of a multi-channel wetlandy thing about right in here mid-project next to this big gravel mining pond. And then most of it goes through kind of a ditched channel along the highway and back to the main stem. So that's kind of a little bit of orientation. And you can see all this much better in the post-fire image. Most of the brown portions of this are higher terraces that burned very hot during Holiday Farm. Most of those forests were completely burned up. You can see that little wetland area with the multiple channels I mentioned earlier is kind of the only green that you see. And so it almost illustrates exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to wet up more of these floodplains to be able to resist high intensity fire. And now will also serve as a place where sediments are going to deposit post-fire. So again, as I mentioned, we started this design pre-Holiday Farm fire, but the basic idea is that the dark blue is the pre-project water, the channels, and the pond. And the light blue areas that you see are areas that we would cut out and use that material to fill the dark blue areas. So bringing some areas down and the deep areas up and creating more of a broad surface across the valley bottom that would be connected to water. If you look closely, there's a lot of brown spiders across the whole thing. Those are log accumulations, so that's large wood, and you'll see some pictures of that. So with the financial resources that we had and with the size of this project, we decided to do it in 2 phases, and 2021 was phase 1 of the Finrock project that you see here in blue at the bottom. And then also the fact that we're cutting much of this material and we're going to fill that gravel mining pond at the top. That's part of all part of the phase 1 that I'll show you. And then we hope to come in for a phase 2 in 2023 with MRT, Forest Service, other partners to finish this up. So just a few pictures of the work that we did this past summer. This is a good example of a cut zone. The trucks are sitting on the area that's been cut down to a desired design elevation, and the excavator's up on top where that surface used to be. So that's an example of a cut zone. Another good example here, Paul standing at the edge of an area that we've cut down to a desired elevation. And this is all part of a design that we have on our tablets and phones. We're using laser levels to get to that elevation. And so this is designed before we come in and we're putting it on the ground. You can see the main stem McKenzie in the background over here, and there's a bit of a small berm between the main stem and this area that we've cut out. Eventually this will be full of wood and the berm will be taken down and all the water will flow through this area. The picture on the left here is a picture of that kind of ditched channel that I mentioned to you in the orthomosaic. The highway is up on the right here, up high, and we'd like to bring this area up in elevation to match the rest of the valley bottom. But first, you see Jeff Ziller there in orange on the right. He's helping us do fish rescue through some of these watered areas. We can't completely drain them, and so we have to use seine nets and go through and try to rescue as many of the critters as we can. So this is a day that Jeff is out helping us do this. And when that's finished, we'll be taking the piles that you see on the left here and pushing those in here to bring this up in elevation. So here's another example of where we've defished the area. We've got trucks coming in and bringing material and a dozer spreading that material out. In the picture on the right, you can see a paint line for where we want that material to come up to. So we're bringing the ditched areas up in elevation. About 3/4 of the material we were cutting from those cut zones went up to that very large pond that was left over from the gravel mining from long ago. So this pan here, you can see there's material that's been brought in. It's been spread by a dozer. We've left some areas unfilled. Those are ponds that we're going to keep. Later, we built large mounds or islands. And so this is all part of kind of removing this large kind of ugly, invasive infested pond and turning this more into complex habitat. Here's a great drone shot from Brent Ross at MRT showing that pond. This is kind of at the beginning, early implementation. If you look closely on the access road, you can see a couple off-road dump trucks running. They're going to be going out to the bottom of the project, picking up material from those cut zones and bringing it back, dumping it in this pond area to create that feature I just showed you. And here's another kind of mid-implementation, and you can see we've been moving the material in, we've been spreading it with a dozer, and we're slowly kind of turning this into a different type of surface. Eventually in phase 2, we're going to remove portions of this on the left, and that'll allow the main stem to flow freely through this whole area, which is pretty exciting. And one of the biggest reasons why we want to build the habitat that we're building with ponds and berms and nesting areas is that we have both western pond turtle and western painted turtle in this area, and those are pretty rare species in this system. So we're really looking out for them. So once we have our elevations correct, we put a whole lot of large wood on these sites. The excavator is holding a whole tree with root wad, and this is one of many cottonwoods that we used from the terraces nearby. All of these were burned up in the fire, and we repurposed them in the restoration, which was a silver lining to the fire. And then some of the results, the two guys there are standing at the edge of the main stem channel. We've just removed a berm, and now the water is starting to flow freely into the area that we've brought to the right elevation, and we've put wood all over that. Real complex habitat. Another example of an accumulation of wood. It looks like kind of a mess, but if you think about it, in the background there, you can see the main stem. There's a channel that comes in between these islands, and then this is very slow moving water. Salmon and native species are going to just be parked under that wood. Really great spot. So another fantastic drone shot from Brent Ross, MRT. On the right, you see the main stem coming towards you. On the left, you can see Highway 126, and in between is our project. We've brought that ditch up in elevation. We've brought this middle section in here down in elevation, and now you have a surface that goes all the way across with islands in between. So the islands also provide some good wildlife habitat. Christopher Lebrecq is busy replanting these islands after we've kind of shaped them. But this is a really good look at kind of the final product. Quick mention of the folks that worked on it. Forest Service and McKenzie River Trust are just two members of the partnership working on these projects in the middle of McKenzie, but they were kind of the primary ones working on this phase of Finn Rock. And BCI Contracting was our contractor. Excellent work by them. And then just finally, kind of that middle McKenzie overall look. We've been talking about Finn Rock Reach here, 21 and 23. Forest Service is also working in the Delta campground area. Unfortunately, we completely lost that campground and access road into that, the old growth trail and such. Total loss that I think we're all in mourning about, but we're again trying to turn that into something more of a wetland, something that's going to be very productive for native species. That's happening in 22 and 23, and then we're looking towards a third phase of the South Fork project in 24. And then these other blobs are kind of our future hopes for more of this floodplain restoration work. There's plenty that we can do here in the middle of McKenzie. That's all I got. Do we have some time for Jen to share?
I think we do, and I'm just going to invite people to use the chat function if you have questions for Robin or Johan, so Jen can tell us about Deer Creek, because I got to visit that and that was amazing as well. I mean, there's so much good material to talk about. I hate to rush us, so Jen, go ahead.
It should be pretty quick, especially since I just got asked to do this yesterday, so I didn't have time to put any slides together. So you're just going to get my best summary that I could put together in 5 minutes this morning. So this project at Deer Creek is essentially an ongoing process that we've been working through there since it was 2017. And so this was the latest iteration. The work at Deer Creek during 2021 primarily occurred in the area of the creek and previously untreated due to the presence of the EWEB power transmission line that ran straight through the middle of the valley bottom. So during May of this year, following last year's work of clearing the transmission line, this year in May, EWEB relocated those transmission lines out of the floodplain and moved them adjacent to Deer Creek Road, which allowed us then in June and July, at the same time that Finn Rock Reach was going on, we were working in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, primarily with Matt Helpstab and Nick Grant, to complete this project at Deer Creek. So in June and July, contractors dug the diversion channel. Once we had water levels down, we were able to begin our fish salvage, complete that using really just project managers and a couple of additional staff members. And then once we were able to work in the dry, contractors removed approximately 20,000 cubic yards of fill from about 6 acres and used that fill to fill those incised areas of the floodplain. So once that cut and fill work was completed, oh, there we go. Thanks, Carl. I just needed Carl. So once that was completed, we placed over 525 pieces of large wood and over 600 pieces of racking wood in that Deer Creek valley bottom. That wood was sourced from a couple of different areas. Some of it came from upland units, which is where we got our really big pieces with root wads, hazard trees that had been removed after the fire and stockpiled at Strube. And then the remaining came from a mix of the transmission line clearing work that had been completed during 2020 and some of the floodplain areas that were cleared as part of this year's work. So once that wood was placed, the project area was re-wetted, and work on that was completed not only on budget, but also 2 weeks earlier than planned. The funding for that work was sourced through EWEB and the U.S. Forest Service. So this photo that Carl most graciously shared is looking downstream from the bridge at the top of the project area. So on the left-hand side, you can see how it was pretty much a straight boulder ditch, fire hose with water that just really blew through there. And on the right-hand side, you know, similar to the same process at Finrock and Southport, we have that wide open, reconnected valley bottom where you have water going from, you know, one side of the valley to the other, and completely filled with wood for that roughness and habitat. So the next step in this is actually going to be the final phase at Deer Creek coming up, currently planned for this next summer, 2022. And that will be the area from the bottom of where we worked this year down to the confluence with the McKenzie River. And then just one last note on that is that, you know, at Deer Creek, we had the knoll fire earlier this year, shortly after our project completed. And the Forest Service was actually able to use pretty much like the boundary of our project area to backburn from that area and control the fire and stop it in that location. So while that was pretty hair-raising, I'm glad that it was a tool there for them to use. And that's all I've got.
Thanks, Jen. I think the benefits of these for wildfire mitigation can't be understated. And, you know, these are going to be great study areas. And I remember when we were on tour, Johan, I think you said that some of our team had been over to the UK because this is such groundbreaking work that other communities and even internationally are looking at some of this work and as a model. So just hats off to all of you for this great work. I'm just couldn't be more proud to be a small part of this team. Yay, virtual clapping. All right, we're going to move on to the Pure Water Partners, another set of superstars with quite a bit of overlap. Jared, do you want to start us off?
Sure, I can start us off by introducing Lily Latterman from the Upper Willamette SWCD and Jen Weber from the McKenzie Watershed Council that are going to be providing this update for the PWP. These are the project leads that really made the work happen. Really since we got up and running since this last fall, and have continued to evolve this program over the course of this last year with many partners. There's a huge long list of folks that we'd like to thank that we can't get to everybody here, but it's really an amazing team. The Watershed Council is more than happy and very pleased and honored to be part of it, along with EWEB, the SWCD, McKenzie River Trust, Lane Council of Governments, private contractors, the list just goes on and on. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lily and Jen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Jared. Yes, I am not going to provide some engaging slides either, sadly. However, I do have quite a summary for you all, and hopefully you can sustain your interest in the summary of what the Pure Water Partners has been up to since last fall, just following the Holiday Farm fire. So immediately following the fire, the PWP team began outreach to the Holiday Farm fire affected residents, offering help with erosion control on moderately to severely burned private properties. And from October 2020 to April 2021, the PWP team completed burn assessments on over 230 private properties. The PWP team implemented erosion control mitigation on over 100 of those private properties. They also developed planting plans, secured 7-year agreements with 89 of those properties, which allowed crews to plant approximately 210,000 native trees and shrubs in high priority burned riparian and floodplain areas. After completion of the winter 2021 replanting on burned sites, the PWP team switched to implementing treatments to reduce fire fuels on 35 priority properties using the Northwest Youth Corps and contractors. And this work was accomplished under a tight timeline due to the use of Oregon Department of Forestry grant funds that had to be spent by June 30th. EWEB funds also supported this work. Due to drought conditions and the stress on recently planted seedlings, the PWP team began rapid assessments of the 89 properties to assess plant mortality and identify those that could benefit from wood chip mulch and/or irrigation. Again, the NYC and contractors were deployed to 35 high priority sites to improve replanting success rates. Once the ODF funded fuel work was completed, EWEB and the PWP transition team transitioned to a longer term restoration effort and revised the property assessment process and assessment tool to include collecting site information on fuels reduction needs, invasive vegetation issues, potential erosion problems, and revegetation needs. The revegetation and monitoring database was developed by David Ritchie in collaboration with the PWP project managers. We call the revegetation and monitoring device the RAMD. And the new PWP process includes a 7-year agreement, watershed stewardship. The PWP team is also encouraging naturescaping concepts and suggesting Firewise best practices when providing these recommendations to landowners following the property assessments. And the PWP is also supporting an effort to create Firewise communities in the McKenzie Watershed. The new GIS applications have been essential to both data collection needed for the holiday farm fire response efforts and for prioritizing work on the ground. GIS work completed in 2021 included revamping the public-facing dashboard for EWEB, updating the field applications, which include the RAMD, the fire fuels reduction database, and erosion control database, which is still being developed. Under the new process and scope of work, the PWP is working with 140 landowners, and of those, 61 are under agreement or close to being under agreement. 107 RAMD assessments, approximately 107 RAMD assessments conducted. Since June 2021, we have erosion control sites. Currently, the number is 25 sites, which is in flux as the number grows, and we have more properties under agreements. Work is scheduled to begin very soon on the erosion control for this fall and winter. Best management practices include native hand seeding, mulching, hydro seeding using a native seed mix, installation of biodegradable jute wattles, and so on. Fuels reduction sites, currently 35 sites, and contractors have been on site ongoing throughout the summer and into the fall, and also this week. Work includes chipping of slash piles, limbing up of trees, removal of standing dead wood, hauling of decked logs, and much more. Invasive vegetation identified, species and other metrics collected using the RAMD. We have fall IVM sites that were completed. Approximately 47 sites were treated, 26 for Himalayan blackberry and 21 for Japanese knotweed. And we are currently identifying and planning the winter integrated vegetation management sites for treatment. Revegetation sites for the winter 2022 include our 87 interplanting sites. We lost a couple of sites to home sales, property sales after the fire and after they had already been under agreement. We have approximately 20 new sites that would be replanted, but that number is also going to increase as we have more properties under agreement before that planting begins. We continue to sign up landowners for assessments. And we recently had held a Blue River Park planting event to replant the severely burned Blue River Park. That was a community event. Laura Colley with the McKenzie Watershed Council has developed a landowner firewood program to remove firewood from some of the properties that we were working on, get that to a staging area, have that bucked, and then hopefully we find or develop this way of getting this wood to property owners who need firewood or do not have resources for firewood. And we've also developed the Pure Water Partners Community Fund, which is a way to redistribute resources, asking property owners who have extra resources that we've assisted to donate back to this fund. And then that fund will then support those in need within the McKenzie watershed. And we continue to coordinate with the Northwest Youth Corps. Winter 2022, Northwest Youth Corps will provide at least one adult crew to assist the Pure Water Partners program with manual invasive vegetation control work, light fuels reduction work, and erosion control implementation when needed. Again, I apologize for not having any slides. Thank you for listening.
That was a mouthful and an amazing amount of work going on. Nancy, I wanted to give you a few minutes just to talk a little bit more about the landowner incentives for this group.
Sure. I only have a couple slides, and let me just see if I can bring those up without crashing. All right. So in addition to all of our work with the PWP program that Lily mentioned, EWEB was able to, can you see this, by the way? I can't
Yeah,
see.
we're good. Yep.
Okay, great. It's not going into presentation mode, but here we go, maybe. EWEB was able to work with Wayne County to implement some smart rebuild incentives for landowners in the Holiday Farm Fire perimeter. So the home site relocation program makes up to $7,000 available to property owners who, when they rebuild, agree to move their building footprints either outside of the county riparian setback, which is typically 50 feet, or outside of the floodplain area. And if they are able to do that, they can receive $2,000 in advance of construction. And so this is just our way of encouraging landowners to consider rebuilding in a way that protects water quality and also protects their homes from future flooding events. And then we'll offer grant funding for up to 50%, so this is up to $5,000 of related out-of-pocket expenses that kind of go along with the process of rebuilding in a different location. So if landowners need to build or extend septic drainage lines or move their well lines or things like that, they can be eligible for those expenses. And then where home site relocation isn't possible, I mean, obviously a lot of the tax lots are pretty small and there might not be space to move a home site back farther from the river. Landowners can qualify for infrastructure grants if they install advanced treatment septic systems. And we also have our septic system and infrastructure loan program. And after the fire, we decided to expand this assistance, and now folks can apply for up to $20,000 per system for the zero interest loan. And Holiday Farm Fire landowners have a longer repayment period of up to 8 years. So right now we have 3 loans that are currently funded and 11 that are somewhere in the process of application. So recently, this has kind of picked up a bit, so we're hoping that more and more landowners will be able to take advantage of this program. And we are also expecting some money from the state to allow us to hopefully help landowners to repay some of these loans a little bit faster or provide additional grant funding. We just don't know the details of that state money at the moment. And the other thing that is pretty recent is we work with a lot of landowners that have forested acres and they need to be replanted. And this is difficult due to, you know, the seedling supply and the availability of contractors and, you know, financial aspects. So what we've done is we have just recently, we're setting up a zero interest loan for these small non-industrial forest landowners to engage in replanting their upland areas. And we're hoping to connect these landowners with FSA or NRCS programs so that they can apply and get some of this replanting cost reimbursed in addition to the zero interest loan. So landowners would need to go through our PWP program to get an assessment, and then we would evaluate the situation and see whether they might qualify for this type of assistance. And what we can also do is provide contractors to do this replanting through the relationships that we currently have with the PWP program. And then Lily talked about the Firewood program already. And then also, this is pretty new, our Naturescaping and Firewise guide that we worked with the U of O landscape architecture students last year to work with homeowners in the Good Pasture Road area to talk about rebuilding options and how they might want to rebuild in a way that is more resilient to wildfire. And coming out of that workshop, we worked with a grad student to kind of compile this information into a guide that's specifically made for landowners and provide suggestions for ways of essentially rebuilding their homes and structures and landscaping in a way that is more resilient and still meets their needs. So this is pretty new. We will put it on our PWP website for landowners, and we're also hoping to print copies and distribute them at various events. And that's all I have. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Nancy. I'm going to ask people to use the chat if you want to pepper Nancy with some questions, because I know that David Donahue's got some slides, and I asked him to try to keep it to a few because I know he loves to show us a lot of data. So David, go ahead.
Thanks, Janine. I tried my best to keep it down to 3 slides, but after I saw the previous presenters, I bumped it up a few.
Well, water
try to be
quality
brief.
is important, so let's talk about it.
Thanks, Janine. So it's been a pretty busy year, certainly, and I just want to make sure everybody can see these slides.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
You're in
great.
presentation mode, so I don't know if you can, it'll make them a little bigger if you.
Yeah, I'll do that right now. These are kind of small. Better? Does that work?
Yeah, it looks good. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, really a very busy monitoring season this last year. Obviously, we've had a big focus in the holiday farm fire area. I actually think I've probably done more monitoring this year than I have done any year previously. I think we're pretty close to 50 events for the year through all of our projects. We've had 7 storm events for holiday farm fire sites that we monitored this year, with maybe another one coming up next week, and about seven or 8 ambient events throughout the year. We have about 15 sites altogether in the holiday farm fire area above and below that we monitor. It's great. We've got 7 of those, I believe, have USGS water quality SON stations that we help fund. So that's a great asset. We also have another 7 SONs deployed out there that we maintain. A few of those we recently added telemetry. Actually, the slides that you're looking at on the bottom 2 images, we recently added telemetry to Simmons Creek. And you can kind of see the solar panel, the data logger box, and below that you can see the SON tube and a auto sampler that's kind of hidden. The solar panel kind of gives it away. And then on the right side, bottom right, is our Bear Creek install, and we also have telemetry there as well. So we've got a lot of eyes and instrumentation on the ground, which helps our job tremendously. We look at about 50 analytes as our kind of base package for most of these event sites, and that covers nutrients, bacteria, metals. But we also can add several hundred analytes when we're looking at organics, SVOCs, pesticides. So with that, I'll just run through a couple of slides on the water quality data, and just to point out the 2 images on the top. That's Hatchery Creek coming into Leeburg Lake earlier this year. That was not during a rain event, so we had some slope instability issues higher up, and that's generating that turbidity. And in the image on the right, top right, is actually a recent turbidity event we had coming out of Blue River Reservoir, which I'll talk about a little bit in a sec. So this is a plot of discharge and turbidity at our Vita station. And I went all the way back to 2019 just to kind of highlight some of our more significant turbidity events over this last year. The big flow we had in April of 2019, we had turbidity get up to about 140 FNU. That flow got up to 25,000 CFS. It was a rain on snow event, so big flows. Fast forward just past the midway, you see the highest turbidity value we had at Vida was the big first flush after the farm fire. I think that was November, towards the end of November. We had higher flows in December, but we didn't quite see as high turbidity values. And then if you look all the way over to the far right, you can see two additional turbidity peaks. One was the November 11th of this year flow. We had about 10,000 CFS, a pretty good first flush. And that last red spike on the very right side of the plot actually is related to the turbidity event coming out of Blue River. So that wasn't a rain event. Looked like we had some lake bottom sediments get mobilized. The pool was pretty low, and that ended up creating a pretty high turbidity load in the main stem. And looking at this, it looks like it's probably about the 5th highest turbidity event we've had in the last 3 years. So I included that in a couple of the next slides just for perspective. And this is that turbidity event coming out of Blue River back in November. You can see I took a look at turbidity at our USGS sites over the last few months. And that first event on the left is that initial rain event that we had that we sampled. And then you can see the second highest, or well, actually the highest peak for Gate Creek was that November event. And those are dwarfed by the turbidity event coming out of Blue River Reservoir that exceeded 500 FNU. Moving on just to a couple of the parameters, I've got a lot of data actually coming in from November right now. I haven't got all of our metals data back or organics data, so I chose just to focus on a couple of nutrients until I get that data in. But you can see that for phosphorus at least, we had pretty high uptick immediately after the fire during those storm events. We've done a lot of monitoring over this last year and include nutrients in our HAB, our harmful algal bloom monitoring. We got a number of baseline or ambient events this year. And then you can see that November 11th large flow event. I think we had close to 2 inches of rain, and that really picked up our nutrient load. Nitrate, a little interesting. We certainly saw an uptick immediately after the fire, but fast forward to this fall, and our last few storm events have really produced some elevated nitrate levels. Keep in mind the drinking water criteria is actually 10,000 micrograms per liter, so we're well below that, but it does show that things are changing, especially on the nitrate front. Our database converts everything. My apologies for having these units in micrograms. Usually they're in milligrams, but we standardize everything, so it's just far easier for me to plot in micrograms. And you'll notice way on the right, I did include Blue River. As expected, not a whole lot of nitrate coming out of the sediments in the reservoir. But when we will look at total suspended sediments or total suspended solids, you can see again, immediately post-fire, we had some pretty high values across most of our sites in the Holiday Farm Fire area. We had some elevated numbers again in this past November event, and I did add the Blue River TSS values in there just for perspective, and you can see that's why we saw main stem levels go up. Those values are much higher than anything we've seen so far in our Holiday Farm Fire trips. And the line on the very right is hard to see. It almost blends in with the right border, but that's getting up to 1,800 milligrams or 1.8 million micrograms per liter of TSS, which is pretty high. And I was going to include some metals and organics, but due to time, keep those out. But our metals typically, we are seeing, we saw really high total metal counts immediately post fire. Those have pretty much flatlined. We did see an uptick in November. Dissolved has been kind of the opposite. We tend to see higher dissolved metal when we have more groundwater inflow. So those results were higher during the summer. It'll be interesting to see what this last storm event produces. And then on the organics front, we did do quite a bit of pesticide monitoring in September and another round in November, and I'm getting those results in, but we did get some pesticide detections at a couple of our tribs in the Holiday Farm Fire area. We actually had detections of oust, an herbicide, in both Gate Creek and Martin Creek, really low levels, but above the reporting limit. And we also had hits for 2,4-D and triclopyr at Hendricks, at the McKenzie River at Hendricks Bridge, which is below the Holiday Farm Fire. So hard to say where that's being sourced from, but just thought I'd acknowledge that. But again, a lot of our organics data is coming in. Looking forward, we obviously are a little short on precip, as most of you know. I thought I'd throw in the snow water equivalent for the McKenzie. That black line down there on the bottom is where we're at. Even though we've had some decent rain events, obviously from a snow perspective, we need plenty more of that. So hopefully we get a little bit more precip and some more snow in the mountains. And just looking forward, we do have some rain on the way coming next week. I thought I'd throw this plot in. We'll see if we actually get that high on the hydrologic forecast for VITA, but we're going to continue to look at targeting big storm events through the winter and include some ambient sampling in there and probably continue this into the foreseeable future. Sorry, Janine, if I went a few minutes over, but thank you for your time.
Thanks, David. Carl, I think you're up.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to be really quick. I'm just giving an overview of kind of the funding situation that we've been working on over the last year. And I just have one slide. So should be pretty straightforward. So a lot of us, we have a team, a funding team that have been working diligently over this last year to try and bring as much money as we can towards the watershed recovery efforts. That team really includes EWEB, the county, we have the Watershed Council, MRT, and a couple other folks there that I'm spacing on right now. But we meet on a regular basis to try to coordinate what funding we're going after and to support each other. So this is the results of kind of what with the big chunks of money that we have coming at us. So obviously the biggest piece of funding was the EWEB board approving a watershed recovery surcharge, about $3 a meter, that will sunset in 60 months. So this is 5 years of funding that totals about 12.3 million. And the beauty of this funding is it supports about everything that you've heard so far, including water quality, the septic systems, smarter rebuild, as well as the PWP efforts, the floodplain restoration efforts, and then land acquisitions that Robin talked about. So it's flexible funding that we can basically fill gaps when other funding isn't available to fill those gaps. And then we worked hard to get state legislature to approve $4 million for McKenzie Restoration. And those are really being focused on floodplain tributary restoration efforts that you've heard, riparian restoration and revegetation, and then land acquisition. And this is a little different type of land acquisition. This is more large scale, high priority acquisition that has a high water quality and habitat value. And as Nancy alluded to, there is 1.5 million that the state legislature approved for the McKenzie to replace, rebuild, upgrade septic systems. Our hope is that we are still waiting for that funding to come to us. The theory that's out there right now is that it will come to the Lane County, and that EWEB's septic assistance program would be one of the essentially infrastructure, kind of that programmatic infrastructure that allows that money to get on the ground. And so our hope is that we can use the zero interest loan program as kind of the way to access those funds. So those funds would help repay those loans. But that is, as Nancy mentioned, that is still all up in the air. We don't know the flavor of that money or how we can use it and what the sideboards are. It's still in process. We are currently writing 3 FEMA grants that get at floodplain restoration and watershed restoration. Those are all due in January, and so we are diligently, as we speak, writing those as quick as we can. And so those will fund. The hope is that the floodplain restoration funding we are seeking will help pay for the phase 2 on Finrock that you heard about, as well as some other priority areas that Johan kind of alluded to. And then finally, there's this big block of McKenzie River Trust, which is matching EWEB. So EWEB put $3 million towards acquisitions, and McKenzie River Trust is raising funds to match that. And so that is the funding that's going towards what Robin was talking about. In addition to that, there's money we've got from Oregon Department of Forestry and some other OWEB funding, and a bunch of and USGS money, and there's just a lot of smaller pots of $100,000 to $200,000 that goes into that kind of chunk of MRT other that you see on the chart on the right. And we are currently working towards assessing some of these other funding opportunities coming out, like the Senate Bill 762, the resiliency funding that's coming through Oregon Department of Forestry. We're looking at that for fuels work and larger landscape work. So that is all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. I think I speak for a lot of us, trying to understand the landscape of federal and state funding has been a complicated effort, and it's all hands on deck for that. We want to bring as many resources to the table as we can, and partner in that, so we're not tripping over each other. So if anyone else is looking at pots of funding, let us know. We definitely want to collaborate on that. Wendy, you're up. We'd love to hear from you in the Army Corps. There's been some changes, and you've got our full attention.
All right, so I do have some slides to share. They don't have pretty pictures; they are charts. So apologies for that.
David Donahue will love them.
Yes, he will. He will. I'm going to share first a web link in the chat, and then I will share my screen. Let me know if you can see that.
It's up.
Okay, I won't stay on this one long. I'll go to the more colorful one. This is just Army Corps Dam and Reservoir Management 101, where there are the months at the bottom, January through December. The black line is the congressionally authorized rule curve. We sometimes call this the teacup. It's like an inverted teacup. And it basically says you have the lake full in the summertime, and then you lower it in the fall. You catch all that winter precipitation that comes in, keep that lake low as much as possible during the winter, and then start filling it again in the spring. So that's the goal for those areas. It's also called a water control diagram. We have the website that is updated daily, where you can check the current lake levels and get all that kind of data online. So this is the actual of what's been happening this year. And you can see at the bottom, this goes through November 30th. So it's just a couple days old here. That red line is now what we are supposed to fill to, our rule curve or water control diagram. And then this blue wavy line is the actual lake level that you see throughout the year. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is related to a lawsuit and a recent injunction that a judge ordered. And that's the web link that I provided as well that has a lot more detail and information. So we are being sued related to the dams and restricting listed fish passage. And while that lawsuit plays out, the judge has ordered some immediate measures that the Corps must take to protect the listed fish. So these injunctive measures will remain in effect for the next few years until the National Marine Fisheries consultation is complete and we have a new biological opinion. We're still operating under the terms of the 2008 biological opinion and are working towards trying to have a new one. Now, some of these interim measures that we are doing right now to pass juvenile fish may become permanent in that biological opinion, and that's to be determined during the consultation process. So the injunction covers the entire Willamette Valley system, but I'm going to talk more specifically just to the McKenzie. On that website, there are 2 approved implementation plans for a cougar fall drawdown and also for a spring delayed refill. While there is not an injunctive measure that covers Blue River, we do anticipate seeing some secondary impacts at that reservoir. Because this is a valley-wide injunctive measure, there will be a number of lakes that will be lower in the summertime, and that overall summer water storage will be lower. And we still have downstream flow requirements, either for water quality, municipal and industrial use, or for fish spawning and migration. So there may be needs to draw down other reservoirs that still have water to meet those downstream uses. So the court didn't define the specific details for the Cougar Fall drawdown or the spring delayed refill. Instead, they assigned an expert panel, and that expert panel has 8 people on it. It has experts from the plaintiff's side. It has National Marine Fisheries biologists. It has 1 core biologist and an engineer, and then 2 ad hoc federal experts. And as that technical panel or the expert panel reviews each of the about 20 measures, they have to create an implementation plan with all the specific details. Then the court has to approve that, and then those details are getting posted online. So I want to talk specifically for cougar. This deep drawdown was one of the first ones. It was a required implementation for the fall of 2021. And it is being done to try to get juvenile fish migration in the fall. And what's actually going to happen, or is happening right now, is the lake was lowered to an elevation of 1,505, so 1,505 feet by November 15th, and it has to be held low through December 15th. So that is about 27 feet lower than what we would typically see in the wintertime. And we typically don't reach, that minimum pool in the winter until November 30th. So it's a bit earlier and it's quite a bit lower than normal. We have also, in the implementation plan, are going to limit the outflows to 700 CFS through October, and then a max of 800 CFS, and that's to minimize the total dissolved gas. So this next slide, I know it's busy, but the upper portion is showing, it's just splitting what's going through the hydropower units. So the generation flow in the red lines, and then spill on the pink lines is what's going through the regulating outlets. And you can see there's some peaks there where the flows were up at 1,000 or even up above 1,400 CFS. And then you can see the corresponding on that lower end with the green line where the percent TDG was above the standards that we're allowed to release. So we're trying to keep those flows below 700 and below 800 as much as possible. And then, so for the fall drawdown, this will be repeated again next year. We will see kind of what works and what doesn't. We will do our best to get it down to 1,500 feet and hold it low. If we have a flood, a high precipitation event, atmospheric river, something that comes in, that does give us the ability to temporarily raise the lake so that we still meet the flood risk mission and not endanger people downstream, but then we have to lower it again to meet that lower lake level. And then the other big operation at Cougar beginning in 2020 in the spring is spring juvenile passage. So once we get through this fall operation, then on December 16th, we will start filling the reservoir back up. We will come up to that minimum pool level at 1,532 feet, and we will hold it there until March 1st. So normally we begin refilling the lake February 1st, and in this case, we're going to keep it down an extra month. Then on the 1st, we lower the lake again to 1,520. until April 1st, and that is to try to pass any juvenile fish that are in the reservoir. Typically, on April 1st, the lake is about 125 feet higher than it's going to be projected to be this year. And this is going to be a really tricky operation to try to still get lake water in the lake that summer. There is some adaptive management that is allowed by the court, depending on what kind of water year that we're having. So that lake will be held low until April 1st, and we will try to delay the refill as long as possible while still trying to reach a high enough lake level by July 1st that we can still use the water temperature control tower, which is needed for the downstream, the fish that are spawning immediately downstream of the dam and in that South Fork McKenzie stretch. So that refill may happen later if we have a cool, wet spring. It may happen sooner if there's a warm, dry year, but a lot of it's just based on what's happening with precipitation. And then the one other part of that spring passage operation will be that between December 16th and June 1st, we will not be using the hydropower turbines at night to pass the water, because the fish often pass through the dam at night, and we want to give them a chance of survival to go through the regulating outlets. So it'll kind of be on this cycle where we lower it quite a bit in the fall to pass fish. We keep it low. We lower it one more time between March and April, and then we keep it relatively low and try to bring it back up in the spring. And then just quickly to touch on Blue River, and I know you were talking about those events in November, you know, and you can see we had some outflow at Cougar that was quite a bit higher. When you go to Blue River, it was pretty low by midsummer. And then, you know, once we hit early November, trying to track down with where we should be that time of year. And this is more specifically in November. There was a bit of inflow coming in around that time frame into the reservoir that raised the lake back up, and then we started to draw that back down again. So that's a lot, and I know it's technical. You can definitely follow up with me separately if you have questions. I encourage you to look at the website for all the specific details on the injunctive measures, and I hope that was helpful.
I'm sure there's questions from the group, and I'm just looking at time, and I want to make sure that Marilyn and Matt have some time. But if there's one or two burning questions, because I know this has been on people's minds, I'd open it up for something quick. Otherwise, you know, you have Wendy's contact information, and feel free to use the chat as well. Any burning questions? Look how disciplined everybody is.
I don't know the answer to that, Susan, but I will find out and get it to you.
I'm going to welcome Marilyn to join us with the long-term recovery group.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There are, well, the camera's not working properly, which is a normal thing around here. I will talk about the McKenzie Valley LTRG of Lane County. Hopefully most of you know that we hired a full-time executive director on September 1st, and that's Devin Thompson. And Devin would normally be speaking with you today, except he has a conflict and couldn't be here. So I'm doing a poor substitution for him, I'm sure. In mid-October, we also brought on a staff member, Nelda Engstrom, who has a position title that we call Disaster Case Management Liaison. And immediately we handed her the first job she had to complete, which was to do what in long-term recovery group parlance is known as a needs assessment. This is a process in which we try to understand what people need to accomplish their individual recovery plans. So as a group, we can find those resources and make them available to people as they need them. The needs assessment that we have chosen to do is an online survey. And Nelda has done a great job, and Devin both, working with Pure Water Partners, amongst others, to incorporate questions that will be hopefully providing both contacts with recovering landowners, as well as information about what their perception of their needs are. We are using an online survey because of the sort of spread out nature of the people in this area. It's very difficult area to go door to door, knocking on people's doors and asking them questions. So we, Nelda has put together a very extensive outreach plan. The survey will actually get a soft rollout starting next week. We're not emphasizing much in the month of December because of the holidays, but on January 2nd, she has a very extensive rollout plan available that includes direct mailing of postcards to individuals with a QR code in the 2 primarily impacted zip codes, as well as media, articles, and walk-in resources to help people complete the questionnaire, and incentives, a drawing to encourage people to provide their contact information so that we can make that information available to the people who've partnered in putting this together. So we're very hopeful. We also plan to, at the walk-in sites, have information available about programs that partners are offering to people. As much as we try, it still is not pervasively known up here that Pure Water Partners is now addressing everyone in the valley, not just those of us who sit on abut the river. But it is slowly coming together, and hopefully we will be in a position to provide some valuable information and help make the contacts that people need to get to the resources that are really there available for them. On just a very quick personal note, I will say you'll be glad to know I signed my management agreement with Pure Water Partners yesterday. So I'm now on the list and looking excessively forward to somebody getting rid of the Himalayan blackberry and the English ivies, which seem to thrive through fires. And I'll leave it to Matt now. Thank you.
That sounds like a Christmas miracle to me, but if anyone can do it, it's the PWP folks. So Matt, go ahead.
Hey all, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, cool. I am going to touch on a handful of updates. It's not everything, but in the spirit of trying to cover what's happened over the last year, and especially hitting, you know, the positive things, the successes, there's a pile of them. So I'm going to be quick, and I'm not going to give a bunch of detail, but just want to touch on a number that haven't been brought up yet. So largely this conversation has been around watershed recovery. And I just want to tell you all how humbled I am by the work that this crew does to protect our watershed. Just continually, it's amazing. The work you do day in and day out is remarkable, and thank you all for caring so much. A couple of things that are not watershed related, I'm going to hit largely on funding, because there is a lot of funding that has been made available to help with recovery. $10 million from the Oregon Department of Energy statewide for energy efficiency in fire recovery areas, 10 million statewide for fire hardening in fire recovery areas, $15 million that was allocated for water and wastewater infrastructure across the valley. A large amount of that will go towards Blue River and a wastewater system there. as well as several $1 million for fire protection districts, community centers, and a library. And that's just kind of a start with the legislative funding that was all allocated in the last session. And there was a lot of work on behalf of this whole crew to make some of that happen. We're currently, like Carl, applying for hazard mitigation grant funds. There's an application being put together for Firewise landscaping by the McKenzie Fire Protection District. There's an application being put together for the McKenzie School for seismic upgrades, as well as other upgrades that would help with hazards. And then another application for a fire preparedness communications campaign to help people understand all the steps that they can take to prepare and deal with fire. We're also seeing on the housing front, Homes for Good is leading the charge on purchasing properties and laying the groundwork for replacing affordable housing up in the fire affected area. For those people who were displaced who are renting, there's very little ability to get yourself a rental. You kind of have to wait for somebody to build it, and Homes for Good is absolutely leading the charge there. This week, they're expecting to close on the Lazy Days property, and next week expecting to close on a 5-acre parcel in Blue River. All of that for long-term affordable housing in the area. We also can celebrate, there's more than a dozen FEMA trailers or manufactured homes up at the Basketball Academy in Rainbow. Oregon Solutions is spinning up right now. So we've had 3 large group meetings and another one happening today. We're really trying to understand what's already being done, what else needs to be done, and what could most benefit from a collaborative effort. So I expect in early next year, we're going to have a narrowed focus that I think will help us move the ball down the field in that arena that the group focuses on. I can't really speculate as to what that is or what it will be right now. And then lastly, on the horizon, you probably all heard about the Community Development Block Grant Funds for Disaster Recovery, $422 million statewide for fire affected areas. That is just on the horizon. So there's a lot to celebrate in terms of momentum. I will also acknowledge that EWEB has hired a grant coordinator to apply for and report on funds. We also at the county have been approved to hire a position to help with finance management and grant applications, recognizing there's going to be a lot of work there. So I feel like we're setting ourselves up collectively to be in a good spot to make sure we can push as many resources as we possibly can into this area to support wildfire recovery broadly. Again, just huge appreciation for this group and all the work you do. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. I echo your sentiments. We are at that point in the meeting where we have 10 minutes, and I thought I might have some more time, but it is what it is. But I do want to open the floor to other folks who haven't had a chance to share what they've been working on and what's coming up. So feel free to raise a hand or just jump right in. Go ahead, Ed.
Well, if no one else is going to jump in here, I'll do so and give a little bit update on Lake County parks.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, our parks that were affected by the fire are all pretty much functional, but still a lot of work to do. A lot of this year is focused on the hazard tree removal work. We have working with the Oregon State Marine Board for pretty major renovation of the Forest Glen Landing, the boat ramps at the park in Blue River. So looking forward to really improving the functionality of that site. Pretty basic right now. So that's good. At Eagle Rock, we put in a proposal to the National Park Service RTCA program, that's Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance, and they assist with planning. And so we're kind of trying to really refine our vision for what we want that park to be, how it can function. That was really the part that had the biggest impact from the fire. So definitely working on figuring out some type of rebuilding. The first phase may be fairly modest one, but this is still going to be a while. It's going to take a while to do the planning and get the funding and get the work done. I'd be surprised if the actual construction happens next year. It's down the road. We did end up selling a lot of logs that were removed as hazard trees, and so fortunately we have some match funding that we can use to go out and seek grant funding when the time comes. Hopefully we'll be able to make the most of that. The Old McKenzie Hatchery Park, that park has been leased to McKenzie Discovery Center, and I don't have a ton of information on the latest there, but there have been some efforts to identify opportunities for trail network, and particularly an interpretive trail to kind of interpret wildfire ecology. And it seems like it's a really great site to invite the public to come and see a forest that's burned and see different examples of the impacts of a wildfire. That park does kind of have that variety of examples that could be accessible to the public. Right now, there's the University of Oregon landscape architecture student who's doing her master's project on that site. So looking forward to seeing how that all comes out. But make good progress, but it's all really slow. Takes time. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Andy, I see you have your hand up. Are you going to forecast snow?
Well, I will tell you that when we look out through the next 10 days or so, we do see an overall lowering of the snow levels. It's, as was touched on earlier, it's been remarkably warm this fall, and Lane County has been really on the southern edge of any beneficial rainfall. As probably everybody's aware, Northwest Washington and British Columbia have borne the brunt of a pretty active series of storms and a lot of deep moisture brought into that region. And because we're south of that, we've had the southwesterly airflow, which has just meant very warm temperatures. Eugene was almost 4 degrees above average for the month of November. So we do see some kind of evolution of that pattern to get more of a westerly and northwesterly flow into the Pacific Northwest at times over the next couple of weeks. So I know the lack of snow has definitely started to concern me, as far as what we're seeing in the Cascades. And there is some indication that we'll start to see some snowpack building in the Cascades over the next couple of weeks. But, we're getting pretty far into the wet season. So, it's given the concerns that we had coming into the fall with a lot of low reservoir storage and stream flow. It's been concerning to see the way things have developed so far this fall and early winter, but it does look like some change over the next couple of weeks.
I think we're all hoping for that. Anybody else want to jump in the last couple of minutes? I see some LCOG folks here, a couple other county folks. So we did record the meeting, and we'll figure out a way to get that to you. And if folks had slides and you want to share those with us to attach with the meeting, we will do that because I did not take notes. Any last thoughts, comments?
So I just have something else to add. This is Ed from Lane County Parks. This is more of a fun thing, I guess. I set up a project in iNaturalist to capture observations from within the Holiday Farm fire area. And so it's been interesting to track that, I think, so far. So this is all the observations posted to iNaturalist since the date of the wildfire. Something like, 650 species or 700 species have been observed in the past year. So it's a really good illustration of, the natural system's ability to recover. It's also a tool for us, and since some of these species are invasive non-native plants, it's a tool for tracking where species of concern are popping up. It's not comprehensive by any means, but something, that hopefully it's kind of a convenient way for people to access that data.
So anyone can enter the information in?
Anybody can access the observations. You need to have a membership to actually add observations, and maybe to download data you need to also have a login. But you can do a search without any login information.
Well, resiliency is what we're all about here, so it's good to end in a high note. And I want to thank you all again for your time. Appreciate all the hard work. Don't really quite have the right words to, just express the depth of gratitude and admiration. But it's heartfelt, and we will connect with you all in 2022, if not sooner. Take good care.
Thanks, Janine. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.